Housing associations have a really, really important role to play in terms of affordable housing, and I want them to flourish as well. At the moment in time that actually developers are having really productive conversations with us about how we can look at the phasing of development and bring forward more homes more quickly. If every local authority could be in the place that we are, and on our campaign for the future of council homes, we know that there are hundreds of councils across the country that have similar ambition to us. So if you were to unlock all of that, we would be an integral part in delivering that 1.5 million.
Hello, I'm Toby Fox from 1.5 Million New Homes, the Local Government Challenge, sponsored by Redloft and by Bouygues and Mount Anvil and Waits Residential and HTA Design. Every month, I'm visiting a different council to ask what works and what needs to change to get more homes built. And this month, we've come to the London Borough of Southwark. And I'm going to meet the leader, Cllr Sarah King, to talk about what this council is doing to build more homes, to look after the existing stock, the financial pressures that's creating for the council, and the solutions that they think will enable them to get more homes built. Hello, tell us who you are.
So I'm Cllr Sarah King and I'm the leader of Southwark Council, and before that I was the cabinet member for council homes.
And what does that entail? What are your responsibilities?
So as leader of the council, I have overall responsibility for the strategic direction and the political decisions we make as a council, so all the services and issues that affect everyone's lives.
You are the head honcho.
I am head honcho.
And you're head honcho of what? So tell us about Southwark, what's it like?
So Southwark is an amazingly diverse inner London borough. Our diversity is something we celebrate, but a huge number of our residents live in social housing. So there are around 300,000 people who live in the borough, and 1 in 3 people will live in a social home.
1 in 3. Okay, and just a little bit more about the borough. What are the main economic drivers here? What makes it tick?
So we have an inner London kind of city centre up in the north of the borough. So we have King's College London, we have big major employers up in the north, but we stretch it all the way down to Dulwich Village, which couldn't have more contrast, if that makes sense. Huge, amazing parks that our residents celebrate. But we're also one of the largest council landlords in the country, so we have more council homes in our borough than any other London authority.
And what's the history to that? Why is that?
I suppose there's quite a long history to it. We made kind of clear political decisions to keep our council homes. We, in terms of the conversations we have with our residents every day, we know that our residents really appreciate the council being their landlord and know that they can get in touch with us more easily. Fundamentally, we're democratically elected, so they can challenge us at an election in terms of us being their landlord.
But that's not easy, is it? Holding that much stock. The cost of it has gone through the roof.
It really isn't easy, and we're in a particularly difficult situation at the moment. So with spiralling inflation, interest rates are really, really challenging our housing finances, combined with an absolute commitment from us to build more council homes.
So tell us a bit about those pressures. When you say, the costs are spiralling, what sort of numbers are we talking about?
So our housing finances are ring-fenced. So we talk about having a housing revenue account. So the money that goes into that is our residents' rents and service charges from our leaseholders, but no other money can go into that account. So we have to, what we pay out as a landlord, whether that's improving our existing homes or building new homes, comes from that ring-fenced account. Over the past few years, we've had some serious challenges. We've had rising construction costs, rising inflation and interest rates. So things just simply cost more. But what we can't do is put that pressure on our council tenants who have limited income in terms of paying for rent.
So you can't put the rent up even though the costs are going up.
Indeed.
So what happens?
We are currently in a situation where we're having to make really, really difficult decisions about how we spend our money. So we are ambitious in terms of that we want to build council homes. So we're continuing to build council homes, but we're also making some very significant decisions about investing in our existing stock. So we have just under 200 tower blocks in the borough that accounts
200.
Just under 200 tower blocks, and we have new burdens that we must address, and those burdens are absolutely essential for our residents. So things like improving fire safety, improving energy efficiency in our buildings. So we're also investing £250 million over the next 3 years in our existing council homes and estates.
And that 250 million is coming from the housing revenue account.
So it's coming from that housing revenue account. So we every day we're in that position where we know our residents want and need more council homes, and we aggressively want to build build them, but we must also look after our existing tenants and leaseholders by investing in their homes too.
So we've talked a bit about the housing revenue account, the HRA, and Southwark has been leading a sort of campaign to reform that.
We have, yeah. So it's been running for a couple of years now, and it's called the Securing the Future of Council Homes. And we have over 100 council landlords signed up to the campaign. So we initiated it with Sheffield City Council because what we want to see is quite significant housing revenue account reform, so that we can continue to build and actually be one of the biggest providers of social homes in our borough and across the country, but also so that we can actually be investing much more in our existing and ageing stock.
And that's 100 councils around the country that
absolutely,
are taking part.
So 100 councils from across the country, cross-party in terms of who runs those councils, who all really, really want to protect their existing homes and ensure that, I suppose, we have a generation of future homes that can flourish in the country.
So what does that reform mean?
Yeah, we've
take?
called for a number of things from government, and we've had some success so far. So some of the calls were around the right to buy and actually restricting that so we weren't depleting our own council stock, and we've been very successful in that space. We also called for a long-term rent settlement. So one of the things that gives us is confidence. We know how much money is coming into the account, therefore we can plan ahead in terms of how we can be paying out in terms of investment. And we've also called for more money to come through in terms of grant for affordable housing. So government recently came out with the biggest package for affordable housing that this country has ever known. So we've had some really significant successes, but fundamentally we're also calling for a much more structural reform of how housing revenue accounts actually work. So they are debt-laden housing revenue accounts, so we are servicing historical debt that was there to build council homes. But while the accounts were set up to be able to manage that debt, what we've seen is that rents have been, I suppose, interfered with by government. So previous governments introduced rent caps and rent decreases, particularly during the cost of living crisis. So that was very much there to support the tenants and make sure that their rents coming out were okay for them. But what it actually did was starve our accounts of money. Yeah. So they are increasingly debt laden, and we have now kind of less money coming in to be able to service that debt.
So that's the sort of thing that when times are good and those accounts are full of money, fine, it's a resource you can draw on. But it's been going on so long now that there's nothing left.
And I suppose the way in which they were set up has been changed by government. So they haven't stayed true to the way in which they should have worked.
So what is the reform that you're calling?
So there are several parts to it. We are making a very clear case for additional funding for council homes. So what we want to see, and there's a commitment we're putting on ourselves as landlords as part of that, is we have developed what's called a green and decent home standard, which is really challenging us to invest to a much greater degree in our stock, and taking into account climate change as well, that we want to be doing more work on those homes and estates. But to do that really, really well, it needs to come with funding. So there is a big call on government for funding to allow us to remove those stocks. But there is a big question about how that debt works within the housing revenue account. So we're also asking them to kind of reform the actual account and actually look at that historical debt that we are still challenged with.
Are we talking about sort of wiping out that debt?
It could be wiping. It could be injecting more money into the account. It could be looking at actually wiping out some of that debt. It could be looking at how debt on council homes is actually judged. Yeah. So there's a question I have about whether it really is debt when you're building a council home, given the multiple benefits that it gives our residents.
Because you're reducing the cost on social services of people who have poor outcomes because they don't have a good place to live.
Exactly. So, and it's often this is the conversation that gets quite difficult with government, that there are long-term benefits of council homes. So there's a saving to DWP in terms of housing benefit. Yeah. There's a saving to the Department of Health in terms of health outcomes. We know that damp and mould is a massive issue, and we know that healthy homes lead to much better health outcomes for our residents. It's about having a best start in life. It's about having space to do homework. It's about being successful at school. It's about going on to get a really good job. All of those things are huge, huge personal and societal benefits. But at the moment, housing revenue accounts don't give you any space to be able to having that conversation.
I'm not going to be a very good challenger of that, because I think it seems to be unfair that you as a council have to pay the cost of relieving all of those other government departments of their future burdens.
But I suppose what I'm asking for is a really joined up approach to housing and actually how we see it as a public benefit.
Well, on that line, just extending that conversation a bit, the £39 billion that the government is putting into social and affordable housing that you mentioned, all of that is kind of going in through the housing association sector. How do you feel about that as a council house builder?
So I think the thing for me is that housing associations have a really, really important role to play in terms of affordable housing, and I want them to flourish as well. But I fundamentally believe in our council homes for our residents. We know our residents want to live in council homes. So we have estate regeneration projects which are our own, like the one we're sitting in, but we also have housing projects where we're working with a housing association partner, and we actually often find with our residents that they want to stay with the council, but actually those regeneration schemes don't allow them to, so they will have a housing association landlord. But we've all got a part to play in this. When the depth of the housing crisis, the exceptional high housing costs we have here in the borough, we've all got to play a role. And at the moment, it feels that the government is favouring money flowing into housing associations rather than into councils.
So tell us where we are and why you've brought us here.
OK, so we are on the Tustin Estate, so we're just off the Old Kent Road, and this is one of our major council-led estate regeneration schemes. So here we are delivering a mixture of new homes, which includes in phase one just over 100 new council homes, and across the whole estate regeneration, once it's complete, it will be just under 700 new homes in total.
700 new homes.
Yeah.
OK, so everybody tells me that now is like a really hard time to be building homes because it costs more than it ever has, because land values are static, interest rates are high, people can't borrow money to build. All of this stuff is happening. How are you able to build 700 homes?
So some of it's careful planning. So the development itself is phased, and we're making key decisions at time to move forward with those phases. We're also having very detailed discussion with our construction partners across the borough at the moment to find different ways to accelerate the delivery. And we've actually found that at the moment in time that actually developers are having really productive conversations with us about how we can look at the phasing of development and bring forward more homes more quickly.
So how does that work for a layman? Like, how does rephasing something help it?
For example, actually delivering affordable homes, if there's grant associated with them, can actually be better for us and for a developer than actually delivering private homes while a mortgage market is stagnated.
Yeah, so the money's coming through the system to pay for the affordable homes.
So the fact the money does flow from government into new affordable and social homes is actually quite positive at times, because it means we can refocus how schemes work.
So what's it going to take to enable you to do more of this? If you can do this now, why can't we build hundreds of thousands of homes?
So the key thing that would really be the game changer for us is the reform of our housing revenue account. So if we were able to borrow ourselves and service more debt in terms of regeneration, but also have more funding coming from government for regeneration, we would be able to really pick up the pace here in terms of the Tustin, but also the Ledbury regeneration, which is close by, but also be looking at where else we could deliver more homes.
And what's the scale that could be delivered? I mean, if you got your wildest dreams came true on the HRA.
We have a big political ambition to deliver 11,000 new council homes. We've had that for quite a while, and we're doing really well. So I don't want to be all downbeat. We were Inside Housing found that we had delivered more council homes in Southwark in the last year than anywhere else in the country. And that's from having really clear political ambition to do that. It's about developing a team of resource at the council with the skills and the expertise. And it's about finding creative ways of delivering, working really closely with residents. So we have all the ingredients to be kind of firing on all cylinders. The bit that we're challenged by is the financing.
But thinking about this nationally, so if you were to build 11,000 homes here in Southwark, that's like the ambition is to build 88,000 homes across London every year. So that 11,000 suddenly becomes a sort of drop in the ocean, doesn't it?
It does, but if we could all do it, if every local authority could be in the place that we are, and our campaign for the future of council homes, we know that there are hundreds of councils across the country that have similar ambition to us. So if you were to unlock all of that, we would be an integral part in delivering that 1.5 million.
So what is, in your opinion, what's holding this back? Why can't we reform the HRA, get that money in and get those homes built?
It's honestly difficult. So if I put myself in the position of government, they have inherited an extraordinarily difficult economic climate. The government is challenged with the inflation and the interest rates just as the same way we are. They are trying to stimulate economic growth. So they are making difficult decisions about how to invest. We know, for example, the NHS and policing is extraordinarily important to our residents too, and the government is clearly really, really focused on those two things. What we're saying is they need to be equally focused on housing.
So Sarah, you've only been leader this year, since
Yes,
July.
since July.
Right? So what's that like? What's the shift in responsibility like?
The shift is actually really quite significant. So I was cabinet member for council homes prior to being leader, and actually that's quite a tightly knitted role to what you are basically making political decisions. You're setting that strategic direction as us as a landlord. Now that's significant in terms of the number of tenants and leaseholders that affects, but it is quite tightly demarcated to our role as a landlord. So, but council leader, you cover everything. So I think I'm still learning some of the services that we provide as a council. But my day kind of jumps around a lot more. I can be doing an interview like this and focus very, very much on housing because it is such a big priority for us. But other big priorities for our residents are the cost of living crisis and what support we can be providing our residents in that space. Community safety is a significant issue, so we're doing a huge amount of work around providing wardens in our communities to help make people feel safe, make sure they are safe. It's work with the police. It's looking after our amazing parks that we have in our borough. It's about opening new leisure centres and libraries. So it's really significant.
But housing is playing a key role in all of that.
For me, housing is probably one of the most important areas of the work that the council does, and that's its role as council landlord. It's about building new council homes. It's conversations we've been having about investing in our existing homes and estates. But it's also our planning function in terms of planning applications coming forward in the borough from private developers and working with residents on those. It's about making sure that everyone in our borough has a home that they can afford to live in and a good life from that.
And how does that feel for you personally? What's your kind of personal connection with a housing portfolio?
That's really interesting because it's definitely my passion. It's definitely my comfort zone as well. I grew up in South East London, and I think some of it comes from that growing up in South East London, just over in Lewisham, and having a really good life, a home, and wanting to ensure that my role as leader can make sure that's the case for all of our Southwark residents too. But it's also a response to the pressures. We know how high housing costs are in our borough. We know how big our housing waiting list is. We have just under 20,000 people on our housing waiting list in housing need. We have over 4,000 households living in temporary accommodation. And those pressures are so significant that as a council, we must prioritise responding to them.
And how is that need kind of manifesting itself to the council? What kind of stories are you seeing on a daily basis?
The stories are significant, and honestly, some of them are heartbreaking. I think one of the ones that I find the most difficult is when I'm asked, how long should someone live in temporary accommodation? And I talk to residents who've been living in temporary accommodation for 10 years. I visit schools where homelessness, because children are in households living in temporary accommodation where homelessness is an everyday issue that they are dealing with when they are trying to educate children. So it encompasses all of our services. When we think of services that we provide to support women escaping domestic violence, housing is often a big discussion in that service. So it's everywhere and it's every day, and that's why it must be our priority.
But people will say that temporary accommodation, it can't be that bad. I mean, it's accommodation, right? They've got a roof over their heads. What's so bad about that?
It's the insecurity. So we're very clear that we have to provide temporary accommodation of a quality that's acceptable. But it's the uncertainty that it creates in someone's life. And also we have conversations where you will have a family living in temporary accommodation, but it's not necessarily close to the school that their children go to school at. So they could be spending hours travelling across parts of London by bus each day in both directions to be able to hold that family life together in terms of where they're living, but where their family network is, where their school is. So it's affecting people every day, not just in terms of the home could be safe, secure and of quality, but it doesn't necessarily mean they can put down roots and lead a good life.
And you care about it so much that you're willing to stand here and, well, it's not sub-zero, but it's like 3 degrees or something, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Talk to me about it.
Because it is the responsibility that the council has, which I honestly believe will have the greatest impact on our residents if we get it right and if government gets it right with us.
Councillor King, thank you very much indeed for your role in 1.5 million new homes.
Thank you very much.
So that's it for another episode of 1.5 million new homes, the local government challenge, sponsored by Redloft and by Bouygues and by Mount Anville and Waits Residential and HTA Design. We're going to be back with more from the London Borough of Southwark in just a few days. Until then, if you subscribe or hit like, you can make sure that you don't miss those next episodes, and we'll look forward to seeing you then.